Hello, dear viewers, and welcome to our today's episode. We're going to talk about one of the most underrated and overlooked threats of our times: effects of nanoplastics on the environment, on biosphere, and specifically on human health. We all have heard, especially within the last 5 years, with a lot of research emerging actually proven that these particles that used to be considered inactive, something that just sits inert, whether in the biosphere or human bodies, right now we know for sure that these particles are doing tremendous damage to our health. But the scale of it has not been obvious until all of the research has been analyzed and put together by the volunteers of ALLATRA International Public Movement. This film is a huge step for humanity's understanding of the scale of a threat we are facing with emergence of nanoplastics in our planet and the exponential growth. Because it's not just the fact that we are producing these materials in tremendous amounts. We have been producing them for 60 plus years. And by now, even if we stop entirely all of the production of plastic, uh, it won't disappear. It's already, broken down to tiny little particles. In every droplet of our ocean. It's in every cubic meter of atmospheric air that we breathe. And it's basically everywhere. Each one of us has enough plastic in our brains to create a plastic spoon out of it. And we are on a path to double that amount only within 4 to 5 years. So, Stephen, I know you have seen this film. I know you have specific moments which you wanted to discuss today. But first, let me hear your feedback about the film itself. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think, as you said, most of us know that it's a problem. We know that there are these giant islands of plastic. We know it can't possibly be good for our environment and for our bodies. But this documentary really shows the full extent on what it really means, which most of us are in the dark about, right? So we kind of like humanity's intuition was firing a little bit about like, yeah, this can't be good for us, but not really knowing why. And then you watch this and you're like, oh, well, that's actually far worse than I might have imagined. So, based off of that was my reaction. When we do presentations on this and people see the information from this documentary, they have the same reaction. Like, okay, I knew it was bad, but I didn't really know that these were the effects of it. Um, Quick story. I actually earlier this morning, I was talking to a friend of mine who is a doctor out of Stony Brook Medicine. And he we were when because I've been trying to get him to watch the documentary since it came out. And I'm like, did you watch it yet? He's like, not the whole thing. I'm like, what about now? He's like, no, not yet. And I'm like, dude, we got to talk about this. Right. So I started telling him a bunch of things from the documentary, which he had never heard of. And he's treating, people with diseases all the time. So what he did was he pulled out his phone because what doctors have nowadays is like a AI for doctors, and only registered doctors can use it, where they can see certain symptoms in a patient or see certain circumstances, and they can go into the AI and they can type it in and or give it like a specific keyword, and it's going to pull up all of the studies of of that keyword or of that specific disease. So as we're talking specifically about neurological diseases, he starts typing it in, and he's pulling up all of these latest studies, and he's getting surprised as if it's something that's just not spoken about within his field. So I think this documentary has like a lot of potential to wake up many, many different fields, the medical field included. So, um, yeah, I had picked a few different topics that hopefully our viewers watching can get a gist of what the documentary is about and then give them some motivation to go on and watch the thing in full on their own time.
Yeah, and let's start with the first one. It's called Properties and Effect on the Planet.
The smaller the plastic particle, the more active it becomes, and the more dangerous its impact.
If you view a microplastic particle and it's 5 millimeter in diameter, and you break it down to a nanoplastic particle, which is 1 micrometer in size, you generate from one particle 125 billion particles, which is the number of galaxies we have in the universe. And the surface of these particles is 5,000 times larger than the 5 millimeter particle. So this just exemplifies how big an issue the breakdown of those plastic particles in even and all the time smaller particles. And these particles have maybe total different properties than the large 5 millimeter particles. So you not only change the size, but also the surface and the properties of the particles.
Nanoplastic has an enormous surface area compared to its mass. It's like a tiny grain with the surface area of a football field. This is called a high specific surface area. The larger the surface, the greater the particle's ability to accumulate and retain electrostatic charge, and the more active sites it contains that bind proteins, metal ions, lipids, and other molecules from the surrounding environment can attach. To understand how dangerous these tiny charged particles are, let's run a simple mental experiment. For example, we have an ordinary 1.5-volt battery. If we divide it into 125 billion tiny batteries, and suppose each of them still had the same power output of 1.5 volts, their aggregate power would equal 187.5 billion volts. Imagine how much greater the voltage will become. Similar things happen with plastic. When a single fragment of plastic is divided into 125 billion particles, each carrying a charge, the amount of charge increases.
Today, millions of tons of plastic in our biosphere are constantly breaking down into smaller and smaller particles, each carrying an electrostatic charge that allows it to penetrate everywhere. Consequently, as the number of electrostatically charged plastic particles grows, an excess electrical potential builds up throughout our planet. This is a major factor disrupting the Earth's energy balance, contributing to warming of the oceans, increase in atmospheric anomalies, as well as the number and severity of natural disasters each year. Note that the warmer the ocean, the more acidic it gets, and the faster plastic breaks down into charged micro-nanoplastics. This in turn leads to greater buildup of energy on our planet, amplifying all these processes in a self-reinforcing chain reaction. In addition, the smaller the particle, the more easily it penetrates the protected barrier of living organisms, including humans, triggering various chronic diseases and killing millions of people. We'll explore all of this in detail.
Yeah, so with this, the first thing that comes to my mind is like you think about like sand, and you can break sand up into these little pieces of sand. But then when you think about dust, right, it's like that sand broken down, like they said, into these billions and billions and billions of these little particles. And these things are all in our atmosphere. We're breathing them in. They're in all of our organs. They're in our brain, right? And every single one keeps the same potential as the original, let's say, microplastic, right? Or a grain of sand that's then broken up. So now the power multiplies. And all of this is just everywhere. And that charge is keeping our oceans warmer, affecting the electromagnetic processes in our atmosphere. What do you think, Tully, in terms of bringing this to the public's attention, and maybe something specifically from the documentary that caught your attention that might help the public?
Well, the general population has been aware that plastic is indeed dangerous. We have been trying to reduce the amount of waste. There have been legislative initiatives, but none of them actually brought any meaningful results. Even the attempts to clean up the waste, the pollution we create is only a tiny little percentage compared to what we generally as humanity dump into the ocean, into the landfills and so on. But what was not understood by people who are not specifically studying this scientific field is why a nanoplastic is so dangerous. Specifically, its properties, its ability to collect electrostatic charge, which affects everything around it. And that's how when micro nanoplastic gets into human body, whether through inhalation or through food and water, primarily though through inhalation. We did not consider its ability to collect this biological shield around this tiny little particle, which allows it to bypass the blood-brain barrier and easily get into the brain. So right now, when this research has been emerging with, multiple labs all over the world confirming the very same fact. This is causing a tremendous harm to our bodies and something needs to be done. The breakthrough idea within this documentary is actually the proposed solution, which is to take away the electrostatic charge of these particles. But in order for any steps to be taken in this direction, of course, there has to be, before the legislation, before the allocation of funds, before the actual research is conducted in the laboratories, there has to be a public demand. Once this topic is a number one topic on social media, online, once it's the number one issue that people actually discussed and want resolution to, then the legislation is going to be proposed, passed, and then we will see scientific labs actually working in the direction of resolving the issue. And, within the past 5 to 10 years, we've seen multiple topics kind of going in a sort of like in spiral, going viral online, then coming back within 6 months to a year. And one of such topics was, of course, the extinction of bees. And it was a very puzzling thing. Like nobody could actually explain what is happening to the bees that are basically the foundation of all of our food. Only within past 10 years, we lost 30% of the bee population of our planet. If it's going to continue like that, what we are going to witness is food scarcity. Prices are going to skyrocket even in developed countries. And when we talk about countries that are not doing so well economically, we're talking about, very drastic change in food supplies. We're not only talking about the crops, we're not only talking about the actual products that bees produce, but we're talking even about the very basic things like production of meat, because all the cattle also is being fed with the very same crops that have to be worked on by bees. So process of pollination is being disrupted, and we are on a path to lose at least half of our bee population within the upcoming decade. So with the research in this documentary, we can actually understand what is the effect of micro nanoplastic particles on it and how exactly, according to the research, bees were reacting to this amount of nanoplastics in their system. And once we look into this research, it will give you a clear understanding of everything that you have seen online. Bees losing orientation, being unable to find the specific flowers or crops. Everything is connected to the activity of their brain, which is polluted with nanoplastic particles. And their ability to use electric signals, whether it's in their brain or in the atmosphere, in the surrounding area, this ability is lost. So let's take a closer look to actually get some more scientific data, because this is specifically the information that allows you to share it online, to let other people know, and that way to take a step towards the solution.
the rate of insect extinction is 8 times higher than that of mammals, birds, or reptiles. The crisis is especially severe for pollinators, bees, whose role in ecosystems and agriculture is critical. Wild and domesticated bees pollinate 75% of agricultural crops and 90% of wild flowering plants. More than 30% of the world's food production depends on bees. Today, populations of honeybees and wild bees are declining rapidly. If this trend continues, half of all bee populations may disappear within the next decade. The disappearance of bees means the loss of the link that connects plants and food, nature, and humanity. Studies by Indian researchers have identified a correlation between microplastic pollution and declining populations of insects. Bees interact with their environment through electrical impulses. They navigate not only by scent, color, and flower shape, but also, remarkably, by sensing a flower's electric field. When a bee approaches a flower, they communicate through the electrical field. As bees fly, friction with the air gives their bodies a positive charge, while flowers, being grounded, carry a negative charge. This difference creates an electric field that allows pollen to transfer to the bee even before it lands. Experiments have shown that bees can distinguish flowers by their electric fields, associate specific electrical signals with the presence of nectar, and even determine a flower's freshness by the strength of its residual charge. After a flower has been visited, its electric field weakens, and other bees can read the signal that the flower contains less nectar. Moreover, the bee's own electric charge can stimulate a plant to release fragrance, attracting even more pollinators. Thus, an entire electrical communication system operates between bees and flowers. The electrostatic charge carried by micro and nanoplastics distorts these electrical impulses, affecting the bee's brain and nervous system. As a result, bees can no longer recognize flowers, locate nectar, find its way home, or identify members of their colony. Even the smallest doses of microplastics can be lethal to bees. Bees are covered in sensitive hairs and constantly interact with their environment, allowing plastic particles to settle on their bodies and easily penetrate them. One of the leading experts studying the impact of microplastics on insects is Professor David Baraki, PhD in ecology and animal ethology, biologist, and head of the Cognitive and Behavioral Ecology Lab, B-Lab, at the University of Florence.
We already know from our studies and studies from other colleagues that, for instance, the microplastic can affect the gut microbiome. So if they feed with microplastics, this can generate dysbiosis, or the microbiota can be affected. In the same way, we found that it can affect the immune response. So both honeybees and bumblebees have a kind of immune depression, so they are not any longer able to fight infections. And they can also show altered behavior. So, for instance, again, learning and memory is affected, and polyethylene doesn't seem to harm too much honeybees, and polyestyrene had a strong impact not only on survival but also on learning and memory. So in our experiment, we really found that this polymer, concentration that we probably can find in environment, can actually impair memory formation and memory retrieval. And this is, of course, alarming because for honeybees, it's, as I said, it's very, very important to have a good learning and memory capabilities.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty wild. You know, as they were listing the side effects, right? They have a hard time differentiating people in their hive or other bees in their hive. They have a hard time identifying things that they would normally easily identify. their memory and navigation is shot. That sounds like all the telltale signs of bee dementia, right?
Exactly. That's
Older
exactly what I was
citizens,
thinking as well.
they just sometimes I was actually just reading something about Japan because dementia rates are rising, and they actually have um these like fake restaurants that almost like, or like these certain benches or restaurants or locations where someone traveling, an elder traveling that has dementia, the people there are trained to uh, almost like communicate and find out if this person is in the right place. Um, but they leave their house and they don't find their way back home and they go missing, right? So they're connecting these missing persons rate, particularly with older people, to dementia, and the bees are having very similar effects in that way.
Well, if you think about it, the neural connections should work in a similar way, whether it's a brain of a tiny little insect or human being. The main difference is the size and amount of neurons which supposed to pass electric signals. But if we take a look at the bees, and there are images of their brains affected by small amount of nanoplastics, and the effects, disorientation, inability to fly, to navigate, and then the lethal consequences, exactly the same as for people who were struggling with dementia, and after they lost their lives, their brains have been tested, and the amount of nanoplastics exceeded the threshold 6 times over the general population. So this sort of tests were conducted since 2016 at least, and that was the first time when scientists drew the line between dementia and the amount of nanoplastics in the brain. Right now, what we are seeing is that these diseases, which used to be considered something that affects people later in life, closer to, age of 60s and 70s, right now it's the bar is way lower. So people who not supposed to be by their age category experiencing loss of memory, inability to navigate, short term memory loss, and so on, they start experiencing this. And it's not only dementia, it's Alzheimer's disease, it's the growing rates of autism, specifically when it comes to children who are also, there is a direct correlation between the amount of nanoplastics in mother's body and the effects that it will have on the children. So those tests have been conducted and the research has been done. When we look at the scientists, they just say all the scientific body of evidence is already here. Like we have to start working on the solution. But if nothing happens, if people don't actually demand this, if people don't make this the number one issue, what's going to happen to all of us? The question is who's going to be the first one to disappear from the planet, the bees or the human beings? Well, the size of the brain is bigger, so it might take longer time to actually pollute it to that threshold that bees are experiencing at lower level. But eventually, everything is very interconnected on our planet, and I think we should start actually taking action right now, because the effect it has on neuron systems is tremendous. And there is another short clip, Stephen, we can show it, maybe the next one. We can actually show how it affects the neurons in our brain. But maybe
Sure.
you have something else to add, because I know bees have been a very viral topic on TikTok, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of those videos where people just flabbergasted.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something innocent about the bees, but we also know, like, no bees, no food, right? So they are kind of at the foundation of our agricultural system. So as you mentioned before, right? Like if there's one topic that's going to get public awareness, like everyone has to eat, right? And more people are coming into people that they're very close to, people that they love and they care about, are coming down with all of these diseases. For example, like you mentioned, dementia, multiple sclerosis, autism. Imagine, like you're this parent, soon to be parent, right? I could probably count the amount of friends on like two hands right now that are all having babies, right? And some of these conversations are like, oh, we're trying. Okay, so like, so first of all, like, I mean, has it always been like you had to try to pregnate your significant other, or like did you just do it and it worked? So that's like a conversation that like I think about this connection. Like, why is it so hard to get pregnant? And then you're successful, you're pregnant, you got a sweet baby boy on the way, and then they're born with something that makes it harder for them to learn, or they have to go into special educational programs. And as a parent, like obviously you want to see your kid fit in, you want to see your kid flourish. And don't get me wrong, I know I teach many kids with special needs, and a lot of them are great, but we know that there's a broad spectrum, and we know that life could be a little bit more difficult with this sort of thing. And then, how you age, if you don't age gracefully, you forget who you are, you forget who your loved ones are, you need special care towards the end of your life. Everyone's really busy, they can't afford to take off work to take care of you. So at the beginning of life to the end of life, these things, these neurological diseases, a lot of people, just doctors especially, just have giant question marks above their head. And the damage to the neurological system that is presented in this documentary could answer a lot of questions potentially.
Yes, they already answered a lot of questions. And when we think about medicine, the very first lines that this film starts with are scientists talking about the progress in medicine made over the past decades. And they say, well, the rate of the diseases growing is not correlating with the progress in medicine. We're supposed to be seeing much lower rates of this illnesses, but we are seeing something that is like completely out of any projections, and we're seeing this growth that nobody can explain. Well, obviously there is some factor that was not taken into account, and this film shows on facts what exactly it is and how it affects our health, and specifically medical products. When we're talking about bacteria, when we're talking about viruses, in contact with nanoplastic particles, they can live much longer. They become much more potent. They collect even more power. They get this bioshield around them, which allows them to mutate and turn into even more dangerous forms of itself. In addition to that, they become tolerant towards antibiotics. So antibiotic resistance is something that is becoming a huge problem. And if it's going to continue like that, very soon we might lose ability to use antibiotics. They just going to stop working. And all of it is a huge challenge for our human civilization and for all of the technological progress that has been made. That's not supposed to be happening, but somehow it is there. And it's our main responsibility right now for those who know, because prior to the release of this documentary, there were maybe hundreds or thousands of people around the globe who understood what is happening, what is the true effect of nanoplastics. Right now, it's available to everyone in the most comprehensive and clear form. So we have to do something about it now. And to give even more clarity on the effect on cells and what is happening inside of our bodies, let's take a look at the next short clip, which is showing the mitochondrial damage that nanoplastics does.
Cells start the process of self-destruction. Each cell continuously produces specific molecules known as reactive oxygen species. These molecules participate in processes of growth, division, and programmed cell death. Under normal conditions, their levels are regulated by the cell's defense system, antioxidants, acting as cleaners. Antioxidants rapidly neutralize excess reactive oxygen species, preventing them from damaging the organism. When a cell is exposed to irritants, such as infection, injury, or toxins, it produces elevated levels of reactive oxygen species, which in excess can damage vital cellular structures. This leads to oxidative stress, a kind of chemical assault within the cell. In response to damage and oxidative stress, a natural defense mechanism is activated: inflammation. Its purpose is to eliminate the source of injury and restore balance. However, in the case of electrostatically charged nanoplastic, this mechanism ceases to function properly. Plastic particles remain inside the cell and act as a continuous irritant. The inflammation does not subside and becomes chronic. As a result, DNA, proteins, membranes, and other key cellular structures are damaged. Ultimately, the cell either can no longer function properly or initiates its own self-destruction.
We've done remarkable studies and discovered that plastic embeds itself inside the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm contains organelles, small structures that keep the cell alive and functioning. Plastic gets into the cytoplasm and stays there. It becomes surrounded by a membrane. Similar to the cell membrane, the cell isolates it because it wants to destroy it. And it starts producing enzymes and other substances the cell normally uses when it's invaded by microbes, viruses, bacteria, or antigens. But unlike those natural invaders, plastic is indestructible, as we said. So the cell is essentially subjected to chronic stress, and eventually it becomes diseased.
The Microplastics Research Group at the Bolivian Catholic University in Cochabamba uses aquatic planarians, small organisms that serve as highly useful biological models. Their strong regenerative capacity makes it possible to detect early changes in cellular processes similar to those that occur in other animals. Microplastics, especially when combined with other pollutants such as metals, are already affecting living organisms. Microplastics can trigger oxidative stress, an imbalance between the production of reactive oxygen species and the body's antioxidant capacity. This oxidative stress directly affects cellular metabolism, disrupting the functions of proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids, which can lead to changes in growth, regeneration, and the overall physiology of organisms.
Thus, exposure to electrostatically charged nanoplastic leads to oxidative stress, inflammation, and consequently, the death of not only neurons, but also other types of cells.
Oxidative stress is like a fire burning inside a cell, while antioxidants are like firefighters that work to extinguish it. Note that nanoplastics act as a fuel for the fire, feeding it endlessly until the cell is consumed from within. Yet, that's not all nanoplastics do inside our cells. They also destroy the cell's power plants, the mitochondria. Every cell lives and functions thanks to the energy produced by mitochondria. That very energy powers all processes in the body, from cell division to hormone synthesis. Even the electrical impulses that we've been talking about depend on the energy from mitochondria. And it is precisely this vital source of life that charged nanoplastics attack.
So yeah, if you experience chronic inflammation or chronic lack of energy, or, it can lead to a very bad consequences, because right now all over the world we're seeing the growth and sudden death syndrome, and no one could explain it. But this is exactly what is explaining what's happening when there is a constant disruption of proper work of the cells, and especially the energy production plants inside of our cells, the mitochondria, which is affected by the charged nanoplastic particles. It leads eventually to the lack of energy, and two most energy demanding body organs are brain and heart. And we're seeing that it's specifically these two organs which are affected by a lot recently. And specifically with the sudden death syndrome, I think it's one of the most discussed topics in the medical field because the rates are skyrocketing and no one was given a clear explanation as to what's actually causing it. And even now, when we are assuming that person died of a sudden death syndrome, you know, they usually would say, well, the body organs were fine. There is no clear reason for that to occur, but something happened, right? But you don't see microplastic or nanoplastics being written as the reason, while it is precisely the reason to what is happening.
Yeah, I think whenever you see, I feel like the lower and lower and lower you get to the foundation of all mechanisms and of health in the human body, when you see it affecting the functions within the cell, forming the mitochondrial dysfunction, now it's like, okay, like once you destroy the cell, now you're just affecting everything else in the body. And who knows? I mean, obviously, there are other lifestyle factors that might lead to chronic inflammation, whether it's just stress or eating a bunch of sugar or whatever it may be. But the fact that this can supersede everything, that this can be the root cause of so many different diseases. I mean, a lot of people know that chronic inflammation is the root cause of a lot of different problems that we can have in our body. And then you clean up, you know, there's so many people that I know, especially being in the holistic health field, that do all the right things. You know, like they try and keep stress out of their lives. They eat all organic food. They exercise every day. They don't consume any like processed stuff. And yet they still get cancer or they still get some type of disease, and they just like throw their arms up. They're like, I do everything right. I don't understand how this sort of thing could happen to me.
I've definitely seen some clips online with influencers who are trying to hype the topic of living healthy. And recently, the topic of avoiding plastics has been going so viral that some of them even claiming they stop using the plastic cups, for example, or plastic silverware, or whatever else they might be using. And then I'm watching one of the videos of one of such influencers who is, over 40, but he claims that his biological age is so much younger and he plans to live until, I don't know, he is planning to live longer than anyone else. And he's hyping this topic up, right? But one of the things that was just hilarious is when he says, well, look at my faucet, look at my system for water filtration that I have installed. He goes, here it is. And his goal, once again, is to avoid micro and nanoplastics. And the whole filtration system is a big plastic box with plastic cartridges inside. They're supposed to clean his water from plastic, and then he drinks it from glass, thinking that he's avoiding micro and nanoplastics, which is hilarious by itself, right? And then another video or picture is going viral with a Hollywood actor, famous one, Orlando Bloom. He is in this clinic in Los Angeles where he's going through this procedure where they take the blood from his body through certain tubes. They put it through a machine that supposedly cleans it from plastic and puts it back into his body. And when you look closer at that picture, you can see that the tubes are made from plastic. Of course they are. What else the doctor is supposed to use? Second of all, the machine itself, 80 to 95% of everything inside of that machine is made from plastic. So it just shows how hilarious and how naive it is Well, yeah, there are people trying to make income on this topic. There are people trying to, propose solutions. We know that it backfired many times before when such solutions have been implemented, like banning thin plastic bags in California led to doubling the amount of plastic waste from thicker bags that were used, right? Or banning plastic straws led to emergence of paper straws, which were glued with toxins that hundreds times worse than the plastic used for plastic straws, right? And we are seeing emergence of these things that get on hype online, like burning plastic to make fuel, right? This is one of the topics that's been hyped up by few influencers. And you can see videos, not even of influencers, but of some random people. I've seen some Indian guys in the backyard. They just made this thing out of, like a pot with a few tubes connected, and they burn the plastic, and fuel comes out and gases come out, right? So in this film, you can actually see what actually are those gases. They contain cancerogens, which are even in tiniest amounts, are so damaging to health that it's simply, we should think that this technology is not being mass implemented, because it would be a disaster. It would speed up the whole destruction of our biosphere by orders of magnitude. And the only reason why it's not being implemented, of course, because it's financially not profitable. The amount of energy used to burn it is way exceeds any financial benefits. So this is one case where human greed, basically, and the profits are working for the best for people, because otherwise the effects of this so-called solutions, which not solving anything except driving income and fame to certain people, but creating tremendous side effects, tremendous damage to the atmosphere, to the biosphere, to human bodies, to everything around us. And in order not to step into the same field with the same mistakes, and in order not to repeat the same mistakes, we should actually have a comprehensive understanding of what's happening, what are the processes. And this is one of the fields where ALLATRA International Public Movement has always been very precise, very comprehensive with its research. And this film just proves that this is something that has been done on the scale not seen before in this field. And I think we are getting closer to the final part of our today's podcast. I'm sure we will record the next part too. But before we wrap it up, I would like everyone to see, and me and Steven to discuss, the topic of damaging neurons and the solution part. So let's take a look at the part that explains what actually that plastic spoon does to our brains. Just to remind, each one of us has enough plastic in our brains to create a plastic spoon out of it.
How do micro and nanoplastics damage the body's cells? Disruption of interactions between neurons. Electrostatic charge and extremely small size allow nanoplastic particles to penetrate inside human cells. The impact of nanoplastics on cell function can be clearly traced in neurons, cells of the nervous system, as their function is directly linked to the generation and transmission of electrical signals. Valérie Etkin, Doctor of Physical and Mathematical Sciences and member of the European Academy of Natural Sciences, emphasizes that the impact of nanoplastics on nerve cells manifests at the most fundamental levels.
Nanoplastics significantly influence the generation and transmission of neural impulses through multiple mechanisms that disrupt ion transport and the electrical activity of neurons responsible for transmitting nerve signals in the body.
Each neuron functions like a miniature battery. It constantly maintains a difference in electrical charge between the inside and outside of its membrane. This enables the neuron to be ready to transmit a signal at the right moment. Charged nanoplastic disturbs this delicate balance, making the cell behave unpredictably, A neuron may activate prematurely, like a light flickering on without command, or conversely, fail to transmit a signal when needed. Such interference disrupts the operation of entire neural networks, like a city experiencing power outages, where neighborhoods go dark one after another, leading to a blackout. In addition, as shown by research conducted by Chinese scientists from Southern Medical University in Guangzhou, nanoplastic interferes with the operation of ion channels. Nanoplastic carrying an electrostatic charge can interact with these channels and alter their structure. As a result, the gates may fail to open or remain open for too long. This also disturbs normal signal transmission throughout the nervous system.
When electrostatic interactions occur with charged membrane lipids, they cause a redistribution of charged lipids and proteins within the membrane, which leads to impaired functionality of these lipid membranes. This results in localized changes in ion concentration and the formation of ion concentration gradients around charged particles. The function of ion pumps, which are essential for maintaining ion balance, becomes disrupted. Ion pumps are mechanisms that move substances against their concentration gradients, a process known as active transport. When these processes become unbalanced, they accumulate energy that can later be used by biological systems to perform work. And so, the work of these pumps may be disrupted, yet it's one of the core mechanisms underlying biological activity.
Signal transmission between neurons is a complex yet remarkably coordinated electrochemical communication process in which special molecules, neurotransmitters, play a crucial role. These molecules act as couriers, transferring information from one neuron to another in a strictly ordered manner. Nanoplastic particles carrying an electrostatic charge can interfere with the release of neurotransmitters or trigger their discharge without proper signaling. As a result, chaotic and false signals emerge in the brain, as if the nervous system can no longer distinguish what messages to send, when to send them, or where they should go.
Any disruption in communication between neurons inevitably affects our mental state. If you find yourself becoming forgetful or absent-minded, if you have difficulty concentrating or remembering even simple things, it may be a sign that the degradation of neural connections has already begun. Nanoplastics not only interfere with communications between neurons, but they also penetrate directly into cells and even trigger their self-destruction.
Well, that explains the bees, and as we were saying before, right, like their brains are much smaller. They're going to be impacted a lot faster. And to your point, right, who hasn't gone throughout their day and has come across something like that, something basic? You forget what you're going to say. You forget where you left your keys. You go to say something and completely draw a blank. I'm sure those are pretty common experiences for people.
Yeah, like how many people walking into the room with a clear mission to get something, and once they got into the room, they cannot recall why they even got there.
Yeah.
And this becomes sort of it's a joke material at first, but then when it happens more and more often, it makes us wonder, like, is there something bigger behind this? And, if it's already affecting us like that, like just to give you a perspective, the amount of plastic doubled in size inside of human brains within the past 8 years. So the production of plastic started in 1960s. From 1960s to 2016, we collected about 4 grams of plastic in human brains, each one of us. Throughout the past 9 years, that amount doubled. So 7 to 8 grams in human brains right now. And we are on a clear path to double it in size by 2028. So the window is getting shorter, the amount of plastic is getting higher, and it's growing exponentially. We can clearly see its effects on the biosphere and on human beings. According to the scientists who spoke in this film, and according to research of multiple scientists from across the globe, they were ringing the alarm about the fact that children who were born after 2020, and when the amount of plastic was already skyrocketing, uh, those children most likely won't be able to have children of their own. And basically, effect of plastic on inability to have children was one of the topics that was also brought up in this film.
Yeah, so many good points were brought up. I mean, obviously, we can't cover all of them, but the fact that the birth rate is declining, the fact that people can't have babies as easily as they used to. Take, even if your child is born, the diseases are coming faster and faster. So between our birth rate declining, between our food production declining, I mean, the future isn't looking all that bright if we don't get to the root cause of all of it, right? The main threat of nanoplastics, the electrostatic charge, right? And it seems to be a common reaction of people to just go right towards, like what you mentioned, creating other solutions or some gimmick, because people know it's unhealthy. They don't know exactly why. And all these solutions are just making things worse. But it's already embedded in our lifestyle, right? Like, we can't not. And even if we did, we're still dealing with all the nanoparticles that still would exist. You can't remove them. And we're not just talking removing them from the body. We're talking removing them from the ocean, from the atmosphere, from our forests that soak them in like sponges, from our bodies. So it's there. And the main problem is the electrostatic charge. So ALLATRA bringing that to the table. How do we neutralize this? Right? There has to be some form of discoveries that we don't quite yet understand, but can. And if we do neutralize it, then all of a sudden, whether it's this the heating of the ocean, we can slow it down if we can neutralize it, right? Whether it's the expression of diseases, we can slow it down if we can neutralize it. So maybe we're not removing it, but we got the clip up from the idea of how this came to be and what's required for us to kind of pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and figure this out.
Yes, let's take a listen.
Now, we already know that electrostatic charge is the basis for their destructive power. It is this charge that allows plastic particles to cling to membranes, cross biological barriers, including the brain, bind to proteins, and interfere with genetic processes. The charge transforms plastic from something inert into a tiny, yet powerful destructive force within the biosphere and humankind. Understanding this, the scientific group of ALLATRA was the first to propose a strategic direction, that is, to deprive nanoplastics of their ability to accumulate and retain electric charge. Note that countless nanoparticles exist around us, yet most do not penetrate or destroy our cells. Only plastics do because of their electret-like behavior. Thus, if we can eliminate this property, then we can turn micro nanoplastics into inert and harmless particles that no longer pose danger to us or to the biosphere. Now, how did the scientific group of ALLATRA come to understand this and become the first to propose a solution? The answer goes back many years and to the work of Dr. Igor Danilov, a vertebrologist and researcher who spent many years studying spinal diseases. Over 20 years ago, he was actively engaged in scientific research focused on investigating degenerative processes in intervertebral discs. His work included a comprehensive experimental and clinical study to understand morphological and biochemical changes occurring in the nucleus pulposus, intercellular substance, and cartilaginous tissue of intervertebral discs. While studying cellular processes, Dr. Danilov focused on immune regulation and pathological reactions that could trigger cell degeneration. He noted that mitochondrial dysfunction was one of the main drivers of these changes, and this insight became the starting point for investigating what might be disrupting cellular function. Dr. Danilov frequently visited specialized laboratories, and in the course of detailed analyses, he found foreign particles inside the cells, which he later identified as plastic. This discovery became a key moment in his research, as he began to analyze possible mechanisms by which plastics affect cells. Through his investigations, Igor Danilov determined that the negative impact of tiny plastic particles on cells stems precisely due to the damage they cause to mitochondria. This conclusion was based on observations that cells containing these tiny plastic particles showed clear signs of mitochondrial dysfunction, which in turn exacerbated degenerative processes. Here, Igor Danilov suggested that the ability of plastic particles to penetrate cells may be due to their electrolyte behavior. That is, the ability to accumulate and retain electrostatic charge, which allows them to form a biological shell around themselves. This property enables the plastic particles to enter cells easily, avoid detection by the immune system, cross protective biological barriers, including the blood-brain barrier, disrupt normal cell function, and provoke degeneration and cell death. On this basis, Igor Danilov proposed that to neutralize these tiny plastic particles, we must deprive them of their ability to accumulate and retain charge. He shared his findings and projections about the harmful effects of tiny plastic particles with his colleagues from various medical fields, including surgeons, oncologists, cytologists, pathologists, and geneticists, as well as with biologists and chemists. Soon after, these specialists confirmed his alarming observation that these plastic particles do accumulate in critical organs in the body, such as the brain, heart, intestines, endocrine, and reproductive organs, where their presence can disrupt organ function and destroy our health. Igor Danilov's predictions were deeply concerning, especially in light of global trends, the rising production of plastics and the growing accumulation of plastic waste in oceans and ecosystems. Thus, more than 20 years ago, the scientific group of ALLATRA realized that micro and nanoplastics pose a serious threat not only to humans, but the entire biosphere. And each year, the number of these particles continues to grow, worsening the situation amid accelerating climate and geodynamic changes on the planet. The implications are far-reaching. If we can eliminate the charge from micro nanoplastics, we will not only eliminate their destructive impact on human health, but also remove the excess energy accumulating in the biosphere, the energy that currently fuels the geodynamic crisis and intensifies natural disasters. This plastic would no longer act as a destabilizing factor, and many planetary threats could be mitigated at once if we can find a way to deprive nanoplastic of their ability to accumulate and retain charge. The question is, how can we achieve this? Well, let's be honest. This task is extremely difficult. It would not be enough to simply figure out how to neutralize the electrolyte behavior of these tiny plastics in a test tube. We must learn how to achieve this for every micro and nanoplastic particles already present in the biosphere, including those inside the human body, and do so without harming people or nature. Given the unprecedented scale of this challenge, solving it will require collaboration among experts across many disciplines: biophysics, nanotechnology, molecular toxicology, material science, and medicine. Plastic pollution is not a narrow environmental issue. It's a systemic global challenge that affects health, safety, natural resources, the stability of our civilization, and life itself. 20 years ago, the scientific group of ALLATRA already recognized the danger of micro and nanoplastics and identified the underlying principle of how they could be neutralized. But to this day, we haven't found a way to achieve it. That is why ALLATRA calls for unification of the world's scientific potential, a message that is unfortunately often misunderstood. Uniting scientists doesn't mean locking them all in one giant laboratory until they find a solution. Rather, it means fostering open international collaboration where experts from different fields freely share knowledge and work together toward a common goal. It's about aligning research methods, promoting open data exchange, developing compatible monitoring tools, and making coordinated policy decisions.
So as you can see, there is a solution proposed right there. And basically the knowledge, the understanding of the entire scale of the challenge that we are all seeing right now, that we are all facing, has been understood by ALLATRA scientists way back. But of course, the scientific research that emerged only recently, within the past decade, we have seen that there are numerous articles, numerous peer-reviewed papers that have been published. And even during the very recent year, we have seen how much more our science learned about the electrostatic charge on these particles. All of it allows us to talk about the urgency of the matter and necessity to implement this decision. And once again, as Dr. John Odd said in this documentary, unification of scientific potential does not mean locking all the scientists up until they find the solution. No, it's the very same thing that has been done multiple times through our history when we faced challenges, whether it's any sort of scientific challenge that requires international collaboration, that requires the research that is conducted across multiple labs in different countries, but with a common goal to actually find the solution. And the challenge is pretty big. Let's say it's to remove the particles from, remove the electrostatic charge from those particles in the atmosphere, in water, in human bodies. And that way we will be able to secure a safe future for our environment, for the entire biosphere of our planet. That's a tremendous goal that requires tremendous input of efforts, but it all starts with people demanding this. Without people's request, there wouldn't be much change. But as we have witnessed throughout recent decades, people demand can change a lot. So hopefully we will see a lot of people request an actual change and implementation of these efforts quite soon. It should happen rather soon.
Yeah, I think so. Nothing's going to happen without the demand from the people. And, I think that when we can bypass this sort of competitive culture that we've created, like everyone wants to be the first person to find a solution and make some money off of it. I think we're past that point, right? Like this is something that affects all of us. And if people all over the world are putting their best efforts forward and exchanging the information to solve the problem for everyone, it's going to happen pretty quickly. Obviously when we work together, things happen way faster. So hopefully the podcast has given people a little bit of an insight enough to go and check out the documentary themselves. And what do you think? Maybe we do like a part 2 on some other topics for people that don't want to sit through the whole thing?
We're definitely going to make a part 2. And also, just to give people a perspective, such research will definitely push our science forward, so that technologies obtained can have tremendous potential to change our lives for the better, and not only to remove plastic's harmful influence from our bodies and from the world around us, and including the financial benefits, right? For investors, for whoever, there is no better field to actually invest into, because what is all that gain actually means if there is no health, if there is no future, if your children are not able to enjoy a healthy life, right? That's the biggest tragedy in the life of any human being. And this is a global challenge that really unifies people in one goal: to live a healthy life, to have a future, and to have ability to give that healthy future for their children. As Dr. John On ended up his message, life is worth fighting for. And this is exactly the message that should be embedded into everything we do right now. We need to preserve life on this planet. We need to preserve a healthy, bright future for the future generations.
Couldn't agree more, man.
Thank you, and we'll see you in our next episode.
Thanks, bro.